Katia, you have the ball.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, today I'd like to welcome everyone to the webinar on graphic organizers that build good literacy habits for Native American elves. Today's webinar is hosted by the National Clearinghouse for English Language Acquisition, NCELA, located at the Graduate School of Education and Human Development at the George Washington University, funded through a contract with the U.S. Department of Education's Office of English Language Acquisition. Our mission at NCELA is to provide technical assistance information to state and local educational agencies on issues pertaining to English language learners. My name is Katia Flemons, a Senior Research Associate at NCELA and your webinar moderator, facilitator for today. Welcome, everyone. Just a quick note, the contents of this webinar, including information or handouts, do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of the Department of Education, nor does the mention of trade names, commercial products, or organizations imply endorsement by the U.S. government. And if you're running into technical difficulties or you're having problems, please call the number on your screen at 1-866-229-3239. And we are still taking questions, and we will be taking questions throughout the webinar. So if you would like to submit some questions for the presenters to respond to, please look at the tab on the top right-hand corner of your screen. It says Q&A, and you may submit them in the chat box in text format. Okay? And we will proceed with Cynthia Ryan.
Yeah.
Discretionary Grants Division Director at the Office of English Language Acquisition from the U.S. Department of Education. Cindy?
Thank you, Katia.
You're welcome.
According to the National Assessment of Educational Progress report, Native American student achievement in reading is considerably below that of white students and Asians and Pacific Islanders. This is the reason that the Department of Education chose for one of its GEPRA measures, Government Performance Results Act measures, for the Native American and Alaska Native Children in School program, chose reading achievement. In this webinar presentation, the experts will share models and reading strategies that complement the learning styles of Native American English learners. They will talk about instructional techniques and the types of graphic organizers that help engage ELs at every grade level. I'd like to welcome Sharon Ballou, Federal Programs Director and Project Director of Project Literacy. Project Literacy is a Title III Native American Children in School program at Penn Keller Elementary School in Welling, Oklahoma. And also with us is Pam Henley, Literacy, Language Coach, and Reading Specialist, also for Project Literacy. Okay, Katia, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. And today as our presenters, we have Trinidad Torres Carrion. And
Hi, everybody.
Hello. And Trini is an education program specialist and manager of programs for Native American grants at the U.S. Department of Education Office of English Language Acquisition. And along with Trini, we have Sharon and Pam. As Cindy mentioned, Sharon Ballou is currently the Federal Program Director. And both Sharon and Pam have had over 25 years of experience working with Native American students. And Sharon has worked 29 years in education, all working with Native American students, first as a kindergarten teacher, then 5 years as a middle school resource teacher with a bilingual education background. For the past 22 years, she has worked as the Federal Program Director for a variety of state and federal programs, mostly with bilingual and Indian education. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Along with Sharon, we have Pam, her colleague, and Pam Henley, a literacy language coach, has 27 years in education, all, like Sharon, with Native American students. Pam has taught kindergarten, first and third grade, and she works as a reading specialist, has worked as a reading specialist for all grades, pre-K through 8, and has taught at the university level. Both Sharon and Pam have presented at the local, state, and national levels. We'd like to welcome both of them, and we will have some remarks from Trini Torres Carrion. Trini?
Welcome to the webinar, and really we hope that you have great expectation. I know that you do with this. It's like a professional development program that we are trying to provide to everybody that's teaching Native American English language learners. So welcome, and thank you for attending our conference. Enjoy it.
Thank you, Trini. And now we will begin our presentation with Sharon Ballou. Sharon?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I believe we're going to see our PowerPoint pop up, I hope.
Sharon, put your cursor. Yes, put your cursor in.
Okay. There we go. Okay, thank you. Sorry. Okay, thank you, guys. First of all, what we would like to do is hope that you will learn in this session learning style propensities of Native American students, instructional strategies that complement the learning styles of our Native American students, and comprehension strategies, graphic organizers that we have found in our school to be effective. The first thing that we wanted to talk about were the learning styles, of course. Sternberg in 2001 defined a learning style as habitual patterns or preferred ways of doing something that are consistent over long periods and across a variety of activities. One of the things that I think in our research and what has helped us in the northeastern part of the state is at Northeastern State University, we have a professor who has been instrumental in the study of learning styles with Native American students, Dr. Sue Ellen Reed. She has been a part of the international learning styles with, help me out, Pam.
Dr. Rita Dunn.
With Dr. Rita Dunn. Thank you. I just lost that for a second. With Dunn and Dunn. And we have been lucky enough to receive her research through her classes and through her presentations. And what she has told us is that with Native American students, they tend to be very global. They look at the whole and go to a part. They're very visual. They like to be able to see what they have to see it to be able to imagine it. They're kinesthetic, as we know, very hands-on and tactile, and they do like to be in cooperative groups. Other implications for Native American students is that as a teacher, you have to model expected outcomes, and Pam is going to really emphasize that point as we go through the training this afternoon. Using graphic organizers and visual elements that for their visual and imagery, creating lessons requiring written text and pictures, and providing many opportunities to share, discuss, and collaborate with peers. Now, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Pam, and have a great. Thank you, Pam.
Here we go. It's good to be here, everyone. First of all, thank you that I can make it here. We've got a little snow day here in Oklahoma, and I've battled a little cold, so if I cough a little bit, please excuse me, and we'll go ahead and get started here. Let's look at our next slide. Okay, we want to talk about literacy, and really and truly what that means is we're really looking at the four aspects, which are reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And I want to make a little relationship here with what we're doing in Oklahoma, which a lot of states I understand are doing, are switching over, making a transition from our state standards to Common Core state standards, the national standards. So what we're looking at there is literacy in content areas.
including the reading areas and writing, but also literacy in science, social studies, and the fine arts. So it's really clear that just mandating the standards and assessments that go along with them is no guarantee for our student success. You see, literacy practices have to be modeled by the teacher and internalized by the students, and only then have we really seen that shows overall raising of literacy scores in absolutely all academic events. It's like saying, for example, if you just mandate these standards, that merely assigning an activity or a worksheet without really modeling it and explaining it and discussing it will actually teach a child anything. It absolutely will only assess. So I want to emphasize today that as I talk about these graphic organizers in and of themselves, that the most important thing is a lot of teacher modeling and a lot of teachers think aloud. So, thinking again about literacy and the data on Native American readers above the 4th grade, specifically in the content areas, this is what it shows. An underdeveloped vocabulary, very narrow comprehension, and sadly, most regretfully, is the declining interest in reading. Because I don't know about you guys, but as a classroom teacher for so many years and now as a literacy and language coach, I want my students to get it, and I want them to be enthused and excited. So hopefully what we're wanting to do is to create engaged learners. And to do that, what we have to do is create multisensory lessons, especially for the Native American children. And truly, according to Dr. Dunn, most elementary children are global anyway. At Tinkerler School, we have an 82% Native American population, and so, of course, they are more visual, more tactile, more kinesthetic. So what we hope to do is provide, first of all, the visual. One of my favorite presenters is Dr. Mary Howard, who says creating lessons without at least the visual aspect is absolutely the kiss of death. You might as well be banging your head against a brick wall. So lessons requiring students to think and discuss and to write and even to move are way more powerful, and the material is retained at a higher rate. I've often said that comprehension lies in the dialogue, and we have to share and discuss whether that's an oral dialogue or a written dialogue. For Native Americans, many of them would prefer a written dialogue, and so we offer them a choice for that. I also am a believer that as teachers, we really need to teach less but teach it better. So what if we chose a few really effective common activities that were proven to work, and we used them continually, grade to grade, as appropriate for whatever learning is going on, whatever the learning activity? How much better off would we be? And especially, we've talked about it at our school, if there was continuity between grade levels. So starting in a grade level where we do begin that written dialogue, and that's usually late first and early second, actually, to really use very similar or the same graphic organizers. So let's look at this one here. We're going to talk about background knowledge, because the key predictor of success in learning is background knowledge. So if they don't have the background knowledge, then we have to help them build it, and we have to help them to kind of process that. So let's look at engaged thinking. First of all, let me also give this little caveat here. The point behind any graphic organizer, or really any learning tool or activity that you have for students to do, the point is not to get good at just that activity or just that graphic organizer, but to use it to allow it to help students become independent and strategic and critical and lifelong thinkers and readers and learners altogether. Because hopefully, as you all know, you're not always going to be there with your students and whatever they're learning or whatever they're reading. And so let's use those graphic organizers as the tools to help them to become more independent. So we're going to look at what we call front-loading. Front-loading is really the process of preparing a student's mind to read, to think, and to respond. Now, I'm going to show you about 3 different graphic organizers that we've used and have used effectively. And let me also note that what we're going to talk about today are things that Sharon and I have actually used, and I like to do a little bit of kind of action research. So I asked for feedback from fellow teachers, and when Sharon and I presented workshops and seminars around the state, I've asked for feedback, and I get a lot of emails and phone calls and just discussions in Walmart about what works and what's really going on with students. So I'm really excited to present these to you today. The first one I want to talk about is the personal pondering pad. Now, one more thing to note here is that sometimes front-loading is for the express purpose of building a student's background knowledge, but other front-loading activities can focus on giving information and encouraging intentional reading for clear purposes. And that's really where I'm going with these next two graphic organizers, the personal pondering pad, alpha boxes, and brain facts. Let's look at the first one, a personal pondering pad, also known as a stop and think pad. Many of you know that in your classrooms you always have that little Annie overachiever. You know, she's always got the first answer, and she wants to say it and often does. And so it doesn't give a lot of students the opportunity to think. Students don't think and process material at the same level. So a stop and think or personal pondering pad is really important. Here are a couple of things we can use these for. I like to have students do a quick write. It's just a short opportunity to think and respond to a prompt that I might give orally related to objectives. Is everyone still with me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, my phone beeped at me.
Okay.
So anyway, another thing that I like to do with the personal pondering pad also is to maybe make predictions. Perhaps students can look at the title of a book and the front cover of a book, or consider the learning if it's a learning lab situation, and make predictions about what they're going to learn, maybe what vocabulary they might encounter, so that we can activate this background knowledge. Another thing might be questioning. That's one thing I always say, what are the things good readers do? Good readers begin questioning who, what, when, where, why. Perhaps they'll make connections, looking at the title, the cover, or just a little bit of information that the teacher gives up front. I like to talk to students about text-to-self connections that they can make. Have any of you ever had an experience like this? Could you write that down, please? And let me also note that on a personal pondering pad, it's important to give just a quick time frame. So I'll tell them, okay, I'm going to give you the next minute to go ahead and write what you know about this title, write what you know about maybe this subject. Also, I like to use it then after the learning to answer the pre-learning questions. So, okay, we came up with questions, or I might have presented one, or the students might have come up with some. So let's answer those on this stop and think pad. It gives every single student in the classroom an opportunity to think and to respond. So for students who might not want to respond orally or can't as quickly as others, every single student gets an opportunity to respond, and it is so powerful. So it's a powerful learning tool. Let's move on. Another thing we could use, here are some examples actually of some quick writes. I just put these up here just kind of in the elementary area. So for math, let's say, you might write about a time you've had to use multiplication in your everyday life. In the science class, perhaps they'll write all the words related to what you know about the states of matter. And remember, these are quick writes. Tell them, I'm going to give you a minute. I'm going to give you 2 minutes. How about social studies? Maybe write one prediction about the next presidential election. And then literature. Write 5 things you know about whatever, based on the title or the picture preview. Even early childhooders could do what I call a quick draw related to a title, a theme, or a character that they've seen. Quick writes are powerful, they are quick, and they're a really strong front-loading activity. Okay, that is the information on the personal pondering or stop and think pad. So I think, Katia, if you have any questions for us, we can answer those now.
Okay, I'm thinking as far as front-loading and the quick writes, what you have gone through so far, they're wonderful ideas and strategies. But could you elaborate whether or not they can be used with all L's at all grade levels, and how?
I do believe they can be used with all L's, especially those who might take a little bit longer to process the language. So I think it's really important to do that. And as far as every content area, kind of like I showed you, there are way more questions than what I presented here. But I think the most important thing is, again, to keep it related to the learning activity, whether it's, for me, being a reading specialist, always related to a reading or even a writing, if they're going to write essays, a writing project.
Okay. And are they time-consuming as far as prepping and implementing them in the classroom with the students?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, the most preparation time is how long it takes you to run off the stop and think pad and whack it in half on the whacker. Okay.
Yeah.
And staple it together. I usually give students about 10 sheets each. And beyond that, I give them 1 to 2 minutes for each quick write. And generally, I would say there is 1 or 2 quick writes, a pre-quick write, and maybe a post-quick write to every learning activity. And we don't do it every single activity, but very, very often.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And we can proceed with the presentation. I'm sure more questions will come in.
Okay.
Thanks.
Again, let's look at the next slide. Now, this again is a front-loading activity that we call alpha boxes. And I have given, by the way, the resources for all of these on one of my final slides. So if you want more information, you'll see that there. And alpha boxes, they're used for collecting related words. So as you can see, it's alphabetized, just an alphabetized chart. And I like to make a large one out of chart paper and put it up at the front of the room. And then every one of the students also has, just a copy in front of them. So as students are brainstorming for words related to the topic or chapter or unit or whatever learning lab is going on, then we can write those up the front. I write them, and then the other students are also writing. So everyone stays engaged. They're not just, staring at the front of the room. But here's the point behind all this, is not only are we trying to front-load using vocabulary, but we're also asking students to be able to defend their word choices. So, for example, if it was maybe you were getting ready to read or do a learning related to the weather, and someone here in Oklahoma, I guess today I could put snowstorm or blizzard, and what that just brings with it these visual images that goes along with the learning. And so I might ask the student, okay, why did you say that? Well, maybe they've had some experience with that. Maybe they've had a connection with that. Or perhaps they've read something through a text-to-text connection. So pulling up and activating that background knowledge. And for some students, it might be, especially ELs, they may be learning a new vocabulary, and then the discussion that goes with that is really, really important. And then we take those and record all the responses under the corresponding letter. Now, this type of activity both activates and builds prior or background knowledge. So it's just really a very strong activity and one that we use a lot at the beginning of each, maybe a unit or at the beginning of a new chapter in content material, or even at the beginning of a new story in the reading classroom. And that's alpha boxes. That's pretty fast, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's interesting because you discussed earlier about modeling, and the Alpha Box sounds like a really great tool. You mentioned collecting, brainstorming, recording. How would you model this and implement this in a classroom with newcomer ELs?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I think I would take the first couple of words, and I would say I always use these words because in a modeling session I always think aloud. And when I do that, I tell students, listen, I'm going to think aloud so that you can hear what my thinking sounds like. And so I say to them, and especially in the younger classrooms, say first and second and third grade, I even have this thing where I put my hand on my chin and I tap my chin and I say, what I think is, and I tell them a word or I tell them what I'm thinking and tell them why I'm thinking that. Mm-hmm. And that is just modeling what good thinking sounds like. And for a lot of students, and particularly Native American ELs, they are intrigued by the language, of course, and then maybe even they have some sort of connection with that themselves that they wouldn't have brought up, background or prior knowledge that they wouldn't have been able to think about just, in the past. So my thinking out loud gives them an opportunity to hear the language and be prepared for the learning.
Okay. And how would you involve the students' parents in these activities so it sticks and it becomes a habit?
That's a great question. We send the individual, alpha boxes, pondering pads home so that the parents can see those. And Sharon and I also have implemented parent literacy nights at our school, where we're at the beginning of the year, we explain our activities and our these graphic organizers pretty much in detail, and we give them the tools that they need as parents to ask their children the same kind of questions. We teach them even how to think aloud, what a think aloud is. And most parents have really get great feedback on those parent literacy nights.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Pam. I mean, that was very informative. I do have a couple more questions, but I will wait a little bit further until we get towards the end of our session.
Okay. Very good. So we'll move on now to another really good graphic organizer. I really enjoyed this one. And the students do too, because it gives them an opportunity to do a quick sketch and also a quick write. And it gives them a lot of opportunity to collaborate with their peers. This one is called Brain Facts. And basically, again, I can't tell you how important it is to model and think aloud the process of going through this graphic organizer and the process of thinking through the activity at hand. And I think it's sort of like the model that starts out where the teacher is the main one thinking and talking, and then we do it together. And it's a gradual release model until finally the students are doing it on their own, doing the thinking and thinking aloud on their own. So in Brain Facts, first of all, as you can see, if you can see on that graphic organizer, there on the left it calls for a quick sketch. And then on the right, it says, it talks about the things that, important points to be remembered. So it sets the purpose by telling students ahead of the learning what to look and listen for. So I tell them, okay, as you're reading or as you're learning today, I want you to look for these things. It could be some new vocabulary that I want them to understand. I might ask them a question. I want them to write that in there. And again, I make a big one up on our smartboard. I'll just scan this in or just create one out of a chart. I do a lot of anchor charts up on my wall, as you can tell. And then on the quick sketch, it just helps them create a visual. So I might give them a couple of prompts to think about, and they might draw a quick sketch of what they're looking for, and as explaining a fact or a concept or a word. And after they find it, then they have an opportunity to quick sketch again. It gives the students the opportunity to begin choosing also important information to build independent study skills. Excuse me, 1 second, please. Because then they get an opportunity to either independently or with a partner or a small group, they can, excuse me, sorry about that. So they can make a decision on 3 or 4 facts that they want to find and they want to explain. And also it helps to use that information to, at the bottom you see there, to summarize the content text. Thank you. Okay. Now remember that this is not just coming up. These will not be just front-loading activities, but the ones that I've just mentioned in particular are. So if you've got any more questions on the front-loaders, we can answer those. And I'm going to take a drink real quick.
Okay. I do have just 1 or 2 questions, and it really has to do with involvement of the whole community in using graphic organizers. How can we involve the Native American community in graphic organizers, using graphic organizers, connections, and ThinkPads, and so on?
Well, I think that the most important thing to remember that is it's multi-sensory, it's tactile and visual. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later, but we can use these as a catalyst also. Again, I told you that activities that get students out of their chairs just a little bit also help, as their total physical response. So you can make these big graphic organizers and put them up on your wall. Maybe give, I can't teach without sticky notes. Give them some sticky notes, and they can write responses on those sticky notes and put them in their appropriate places up there on the wall in the graphic organizer. I think also, too, is collaboration with peers, Native American in particular, and most global students, like a small group collaboration before they're ever asked to share in front of the class. So graphic organizers, these especially, are a good way for them to collaborate and work cooperatively with their peers.
Okay. And now the prior fun-learning activity that you mentioned, brain facts, how would you model that and implement those types of strategies in the primary years, primary grades, especially with first and second grade?
On the brain facts, you would on those tasks you could do some dictation. So you might be able to let them do the quick sketch, and then you come around and say, okay, great, I really like what you've drawn here. Tell me about that, and that's what we write in there when they're producing their own facts. Otherwise, I would just write the information on it myself before I made copies and gave it to them, what to remember, on the section that asks students what to look for. And then as we're reading, I can let them have the opportunity to stop at certain points, and I'll say, okay, remember back, this is what we were looking for. Did anyone see that on this page? And actually, students really love that. We call it ERT. Everyone reads to a particular place, and then we stop and think about it. I do a lot of pair shares with the lower elementary, the primary grades, and just give them, okay, you have 30 seconds to talk with your buddy. What did you think you found? What's the most important thing? Or did you find what we were looking for here? And they get to share that. And if they can't yet write it on their own, then I can do a small dictation with them, or we can just share orally, and I'll write it up on the board, and they can either copy or just give it to me orally.
Okay. And one more question, and this is directed to either one, Pam or Sharon, anyone who would like to comment. But you mentioned collaboration. Now, how does one communicate to a classroom teacher the need for ELLs to have access to graphic organizers, even when the teacher purposefully does not allow her whole class to use them? In other words, the scaffolding of ELLs may be seen as unfair to that particular teacher who wants to have one system for the whole class. So how would you kind of get buy-in and collaboration to actually have those working with ELLs use the graphic organizers in the classroom?
Sharon, I'll start, and if you want to jump in there, as I just think about what you're saying, I would have to say one of the rules for us really is, and if you look at the nationwide, and I hate to call it a movement, but let's call it an understanding, that we have to have differentiation in the classroom. I would say first and foremost that we've got to use what works, and if this graphic organizer works for these Native American or ELLs in the classroom, then in the primary grades, it's good for all students. So, but in particular, those who struggle with the language. Sharon, what do you think?
And I was going to say training. I think that when you, a lot of it is being able to work with your teachers, either in as like we are doing now, which we do because we do a lot of learning community training among our teachers, and so and being able to prove that they work. That would be, and as Pam stated earlier, she is and has been doing an action study, especially with the third grade class that she's working with in particular. So a lot of it is training and being able to show that what you're using actually works in the classroom, and particularly with our Native American students and ELLs.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I just want to get a quick show of electronic hands. We have some hands that are midway on the screen on the right-hand side. I just wanted to have folks, just participants, indicate to us by raising your hand if you have multiple people participating with you on this webinar. And I'll just, for a moment there. Okay. Okay. All right. And we can continue with our presentation. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, very good. So we're going to move on now, and we're going to talk about another, just a very favorite. Let me also just tell you a little bit about this graphic organizer and this learning activity, which many of you probably already know about, is the Jigsaw activity, where you assign a particular amount of text or a particular amount of activity, learning, whatever is going on sometimes, to a small group. And then they kind of become the professionals, they become the teachers or the experts on it. Sharon and I are actually using this strategy with our teachers as we're doing some professional development on Common Core and on just engaged learning. And so we find it to be really effective at every level. We've done this. I have used this particular activity as low as second grade, and many of you, if you're in early childhood, can find ways to adapt it and use it in the lower grades as well. But anyway, I just thought you'd like that little story that we were using it on our adult learners, and it works quite well. This particular graphic organizer and the ones that we'll talk about, not just front-loading, they can be used as front-loading before and during and then after the reading of the text. So again, most important thing to remember is we need to model, and by doing that, really thinking out loud the process that you as the best thinker in your classroom go through as you're thinking about how you might become the expert on your particular text section. So first you divide the class into the same number of sections to be read in the text, so maybe pages or paragraphs, but no more than 3 or 4. And after dividing students into groups, and you give them their particular assignment, then they'll mark in a box up on the graphic organizer whether they are going to be the teacher box for that, and they will be on that particular text, and for whichever group that they're in. And then when they are with another group who is explaining the text that they had, then they'll mark the learner box. So after you assign each group a section to become experts, and then they have to think about, and you have modeled this, a plan to teach the class. And I really give them about 2 or 3 things they can do. You can draw a picture to show what you've learned and be ready to explain. And I always have them do a little bit of a quick write to go with that. Or they can be prepared to, in the older grades, they can create a little PowerPoint or just a little written summary of what they've learned. They can choose particular vocabulary. Everybody has a choice on how they might share their text. And each group reads with a specific goal in mind. For example, they may choose a few key words or choose some ideas that they want to share. And then you try to incorporate collaboration and self-selection by allowing the students to select 3 facts. Maybe I've given them 2 or 3 things to look at, and then they select 2 or 3 facts as a group, and one that you personally consider important. A lot of times if we do that kind of activity, it allows ownership of the learning, and probably one of the most powerful tools. After that, you allow time after the reading of the text for the groups to discuss and complete their form together and discuss their learning plan and their teaching plan. And finally, the students then teach their text to the class. And what's really neat about this is you can, depending on how much time, you can do this as small groups, and they can just, group 1 and group 2 get together and they kind of share what they learned. And what we noted, and this was particularly in the 3rd grade classroom, was whatever notes that the teaching group had, they just began to write on the board. They just looked like such good teachers, and they were able to allow their learner group to write their notes down too. And after they do that, you could also either work one-on-one together, or you could allow them to stand in front of 2 other small groups before they're ever asked to stand in front of the whole classroom. And particularly for Native American students, this is really, really good. It gives them an opportunity to share. And then if you're working in a small group, then they have an opportunity to choose their speaker leader for that as well. Okay, so that is Jigsaw Notes. Any questions on that? Katia, are you here?
Hello? Yes, we do not have any questions at this time.
Okay.
Okay.
I just was so concerned I'd lost you. Here we go. All right, now we're going to move on to another great graphic organizer called Drawing Conclusions. And this is kind of like, it helps us actually think backwards. So, again, we have to model this and again, do it through Think Aloud where the teacher says, okay, this is what's going on in the story. Now, I think, or I infer, or I believe what's happening is this, and then I go backwards to prove my point. So, after giving the graphic organizer and creating one also in front of the class, I assign a portion of the text to be read, and then the students work in partners or small groups, and then they decide on the conclusion or the big picture, the overall what we're looking at, the overarching idea or message that the author is giving. And then they write that in the conclusion box. Now, you may have 3 or 4 of these for an entire text reading, but it makes for a great study guide as well. Then as a group, they return to the text to find up to 3 support sentences or phrases to, quote, prove the conclusion, and then they write those there under evidence. And if there's time enough, and usually there's time to do a quick draw. And again, for Native American elves, this is a good activity to help with their visual imagery. It helps embed the information for those that are visual learners, which we now know most elementary students are as global learners. So that was really quick, but it is a very quick activity. Again, it allows for collaboration, but it also would allow for individualization as well. So this is a really good one to help readers be thinkers and thinkers to be writers and writers to be learners and listeners. And so we really like this one. It works out really well. Any questions on it?
Well, I actually have 2 questions. One is actually going back to the jigsaw. I have a participant asking what was on the left side of the jigsaw organizer.
Mm-hmm. On the jigsaw organizer, there's just a kid standing there and the boxes are there to either check learner or teacher.
Okay. And, okay, so I see. I'm looking at it now. And do graphic organizers work with all kinds of text, literature, content, reading, and other types?
Absolutely. You can make them work with I haven't found the text yet I couldn't use it with, I'll say that.
Okay. And lastly, I noticed many people have been asking about the graphic organizers that are seen in this PowerPoint presentation. And I just would like to note that if anyone would like to get a hold of the graphic organizers presented in today's webinar, at the end we will have Sharon Ballou and Pam Henley's contact information. And you are welcome to contact them, and they will provide you with the graphic organizers that you see here on the webinar. Okay? And you can continue, Pam.
Okay, very good. Okay, and now lastly, we're going to look at this 3-column note-making. We really like this one as well, and when I say we, I'm really referring to the teachers that I work with and their students, because this is really helpful as we're studying for a project or studying for an assessment at the end of a unit, at the end of any text. But it really helps embed the information in students' minds. And again, we have to model and think aloud the process. And this particular graphic organizer is real similar to when I grew up, which was just 5 or 30 years ago, to the old SQ3R model. But it takes less time, and you can get as much information across. There's less time creating an outline, but it creates its own outline for the learning. You may have to have 2 or 3 of these, but again, I like to create a big model on the wall or up on the board so that students are all engaged, and I'm not the only one writing, but they're not either, and they have me to use as a model. So in this particular activity, the students create questions out of headings in their text, and that's what you put in that first column. You just look at the headings and say the heading. Well, one in particular we did with a second grade group was a nonfiction text on growing pumpkins. So the headings were things like seeds to sprout. So it naturally generated the question, how does a seed grow to a sprout? So we wrote that in that left side in the heading box. And then in the next column, the students worked through the text and described the pictures or the tables and graphs and charts or even captions that they see in the text. And they just described them. It looked like a little tree growing from the ground, or however they want to describe them. And I also, on my big graphic organizer on the board, I like to make a copy of and maybe draw a picture of my own that I can put up there, and then the students can write specifically to that picture or that graph or chart. And then lastly, in the last column, students answer the questions as they read, not after they read, but while we're reading. I tell them, okay, if you get an answer to this, would you write it in your column? And sometimes they don't get all the way through the text, but I just tell them, okay, did you answer that question? Did you find that there? And if not, then I lead them to the page or the pages where the information can be found. And they record the answer in the last column. I try very hard to help them to understand very quickly. This is not an opportunity to copy, but to put the learning in your own words, which is really good for Native Americans and elves in particular, because I have them just set the book and think. Okay, think about what you found out about. Now, how can you tell me? For a lot of primary students, they have to talk about it first, so I allow collaboration and pair sharing, and even talking in small groups with me or the classroom teacher. And it really helps them to embed that and think it out beforehand what they're going to say and what they're going to write. So that is the final graphic organizer before, during, and after reading for the 3-column note making. So now what? Again, just a reminder that the whole point of graphic organizers is not to get good at graphic organizing, but to get good at thinking and learning and reading and discussing. So all graphic organizers lend themselves to creating a common summary of a text, which is where we are headed, as I understand with this next generation assessments that we're going to be giving, is that they're going to need to be able at all levels, where they begin taking the Common Core test, to be able to put things into a summary form, an essay form. So all of these graphic organizers lend themselves to creating that. And they can also be used to create, like I've said many times during the presentation, classroom displays, where students place sections of a graphic organizer onto the wall of the room or the hallway. And let me just say that at Painkiller, we have these up all over the hallway, and the kids really enjoy them as they're coming to the bathroom or coming to or from the bathroom or cafeteria or library. They really enjoy reading these and looking at them. And it just helps to embed the learning. And they also can be used as a catalyst to a project a lot of times, making their own individual charts or individual graphic displays. Kids are very creative, and if we give them a little bit of room, they can use these graphic organizers to create a display to help explain it to others. So, graphic organizers are not an end to themselves, but just really a tool for students to really create and to think and to put their thoughts onto paper. I'm going to go through these and just kind of buzz through. You can go back to these. I think it'll be available for you all to see. These are the references, basically, where I gotten a few of these graphic organizers, not all of them. Some of them are just self-made. But I've always wanted my own quote. I noticed that a lot of people have their own quote out there, so I created this for us today. And here it is, in closing. By using strategies proven to be engaging and effective, we can really make a difference in helping children not only be 21st century learners, but children who can read the world for a lifetime. And that is my goal.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Quite informative and an excellent goal. I think most teachers would have that as their goal.
I do too. I hope so.
Yes. And moving to our next slide, we do have a couple more questions.
Sure.
Before we end our webinar. We have one question relating back to the alpha boxes. In the use of alpha boxes, is the selection of related words based on meaning, like the meaning of the word, or word association in the mind of the student?
It would be both. It would be both. And the meaning really is going to be, I think, brought out in the discussion.
Okay. Okay. And how effective are the graphic organizers in taking into consideration the learning style of Native American elves, but particularly effective with Native American elves? How effective have you found the graphic organizers to be?
And like I said earlier, I really like to do a lot of action research. In particular, what I've seen, and also just, again, the feedback that I've gotten from teachers is not just how well they've done on an assessment to follow it up, but also just how more open their students seem to be and more creative and more, I think, able to collaborate and really just become stronger thinkers in the classroom. So as far as effectiveness, we could see it on an assessment, but I think even more than that, I look at anecdotal records and just teacher discussions that we've had, and I think they're very effective.
Okay. And I think this one question I see here probably relates back to the Jigsaw graphic organizer. Do the students complete straight across the row, or does it alternate?
They complete straight across for their section that they're the teacher for, and then whenever they go to a new group, that group number is on there. I think it says 1, 2, 3, and 4 because you're only dividing them up into 4 groups, and then they work across with their next group. So it's all numbered, whichever group they go to, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah. And how might we use some of these graphic organizers, say, in the math or science discipline?
That's a great question. Well, I can tell you this, that in both the math and sciences, there is a lot of reading to do, especially in science. And in math, I would say, as I think about using these, I have a good friend who's a math teacher, and she says, she brings about like question problems of the day, and they lend themselves to some of these graphic organizers. But I think they're especially powerful in the content areas because there really are ways for a lot of thinking and discussion and enhancement of vocabulary and concepts.
Okay. Now, is there one that lends itself better to a particular subject area?
That's a great idea. I will say that the personal pondering pad is just throughout. But if you're looking at specifically, I would say content area sciences and social studies, looking at nonfiction text material that have headings and subheadings, I would look at this recall and note making on that. Really a powerful graphic organizer for those kind of texts.
Okay. And I think this will probably be my last question, we'll see. But, and I know we talked about parent involvement, community involvement, but could you reiterate how we can involve the students' parents in these activities and give examples?
I always send my material home with the students, try to give real immediate feedback. But I also, again, we try to do kind of what Sharon said earlier with our teachers. We also do with our parents. We do an upfront training about what these graphic organizers look like, how important they are. We give them some research on it and how it helps students develop thinking skills as well as vocabulary and reading strategies too. So we really, I think, training your parents up front, and if they don't come to parent literacy night or parent-teacher conferences, then we can send the information home and hopefully to be read. Typically, the parents that are involved and they'll show up at one of those, either a parent-teacher conference or a parent literacy night that's specifically designed for the reading.
Okay. And I think that concludes our question and answer session. And again, I'll just reiterate for everyone as we conclude with our webinar that if you would like a copy of the graphic organizers presented in the webinar, please contact Sharon Ballou or Pam Henley to obtain these graphic organizers. And the presenters would also like that if you do use the graphic organizers, to please send in your feedback of your experience using the graphic organizers. And this concludes our webinar for today. Thank you for participating in today's webinar on graphic organizers that build good literacy habits for Native American elves, presented by Trinidad Torres Carrion, Sharon Ballou, and Pam Henley, and hosted by the National Clearinghouse for English Language Acquisition, NCELA, located at the Graduate School of Education and Human Development at the George Washington University. For more information or if you have additional questions regarding the actual aspect of the webinar, please contact Trinidad Torres Carrion at trinidad.torres-carrion@ed.gov, Sharon Ballou at SPBALLEW at 10killer.k12.ok.us, and Pam Henley at PHENLEY Henley at 10killer.k12.ok.us. And if you have additional questions regarding the webinar, contact Katia Flemons at KFLEMENS@GWU.edu. Reminder to all the participants that this webinar will be archived on the NCELA's website. And to view archived webinars, please visit http://www.ncela.gwu.edu/webinars/. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening, all.